Breaking news, we have video just in from Barcelona where survivors and citizens are holding a candlelight vigil to honor and remember the 14 people who were murdered yesterday by Islamic terrorists. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson confirming one American had been among those killed in the attack. Now, at this hour, the manhunt is now stretching from Spain into France. The Associated Press reporting that Spanish police are looking for a utility vehicle that was rented by suspects in the Barcelona attack that may have then crossed into France. French authorities have been alerted. They say police nationwide are on the lookout for the vehicle. In the wake of yet another vehicle attack in Europe, just how can big cities protect their citizens from these types of attacks, and what kind of security measures are needed going forward? We bring in the experts. John Hanna, Foundation of Defense of Democracy Senior Counselor, and Jamil Jaffer. He's former Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chief Counsel and Senior Advisor. Welcome to you both. Jamil, I'll begin with you. This is an old story, unfortunately. Close to 10 or more, depending on how you're looking at who perpetrated what, of these weaponized vehicle attacks are now almost de rigueur. What do you think is a better way, because it's clearly very difficult to fight, to take on this kind of attack?
Yeah, no, you're right, Liz. You know, in a free society, it's very hard to defend against attacks where the attackers use normal vehicles and normal means of conveyance to attack people. And when you're talking about sort of, you know, small casualty attacks, it's hard to prevent because there's not a lot of planning going on. They're driving things into crowds. And so in a lot of ways, the best example we can look to is to the Israelis, who try really hard to protect against attacks just like these, but have a hard time themselves even doing it. And they live in a much more restricted society than even in Europe or the United States.
You know, that is true. Israel gets a lot of grief for forcing non-Israeli citizens, Palestinians in particular, to have special license plates because, again, you learn from mistakes. You learn that, yes, you want defense of democracy, John. Exactly. We don't want to lose our freedoms. We don't want them to win, so to speak. But neither does Israel. But they say human lives over human rights. Is that where Europe is going?
Well, let's certainly hope not, because at some point, when you restrict your freedoms too much, I think the terrorists probably win, Liz. But I think we do. This is, as you've said now, we've seen this time after time in Europe, this use of vehicles. It may not be possible to prevent all of these attacks, but I think there are smart counterterrorism heads that need to be put together to figure out how we can at least take some kinds of effective measures to limit the amount of damage that might be done here.
Jamil, let's shift gears because we are, of course, keeping an eye on Camp David, where President Trump is now meeting with top officials in the military about Afghanistan. He has been very clear that he feels that we're losing that. It's a mess. It's gone on way too long. A lot of Americans agree. And yet Secretary of Defense Mattis would like to perhaps add more, not boots on the ground, but advisors and American military who can train Afghanistan military to protect against ISIS and protect against the Taliban. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, look, Liz, I think it's really important that we continue to keep the pressure up against al-Qaeda and ISIS. The reality is the reason we've avoided a terrorist attack here in the United States by al-Qaeda is because we kept them on the run. We haven't done as good a job on ISIS, and they're able to plan and inspire more people. So pulling out of Afghanistan now, would be a terrible idea in my mind. And I actually think Secretary Mattis has it exactly right. We need to double down on this effort and take the fight to the terrorists where they are and not when they come against us.
John, what's your thought on that? Because you can fight this many ways. You can fight with cybersecurity, which the president is also discussing at Camp David, or you can fight with actual hardware, military might. Is there a better way? I mean, you've got ISIS putting out all kinds of word throughout the internet, even as sites like Facebook are trying to shut them down, and they manage to convince people, who knows why, to join this ridiculous fight.
Yeah, no, it's clear that we need a comprehensive strategy, Liz. That's always been the case. We obviously need to throw much more resources at cyber, but at the end of the day, to the extent there are people on the battlefield and these kinds of battlefield victories, as we saw in 2014 in Iraq and Syria, serve like jet fuel on the fires of the global jihadist movement, that you've got to also fight them physically on the battlefield, but take away their money, fight them in cyberspace. Law enforcement enforcement and intelligence that takes these radicalized individuals that haven't committed terrorist attacks off the battlefield. We've got to be willing to do it all, and we've got to have a timeline that is longer than the jihadists.
John Hannah, we've got to. We just have to. John, thank you very much. Jamil, it's wonderful to see you. We appreciate both of your perspectives here. We've got 15 minutes before the closing bell rings. We're going to come right back on why the markets are continuing to fall. Dow is now down 37, even though they had a big rally after it was announced Steve Bannon, the lightning rod at the White House, was going to be booted. We're coming right back. Charlie has the story.